Well, this is the Morning Drift. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us for very, very constructive and political conversations as we gear towards the August 9th general elections. Kenya is looking forward to a very changing moment for this country. But of course, joining me this morning, you will see him shortly, is Mr. Sadam Gachie, who I will say now is a friend of Look Up TV, and hoping that civic education also becomes part of this conversation. But before we dig into the agenda of this very sitting today, that is matters promises. We're looking at manifestos. So far, these people have made it to the ballot. We are just on 6 days to go. We are going to make that decision that particular day. But do Kenyans really then sit down and analyze these manifestos, promises, and question how practical they are? Remember, we always make fun of reality versus expectations or the other way around. But do you do that check also before you go to the ballot? All right, now before we get into that, I'll just check a bit of research from the World Bank in Kenya. And it read, Kenya has made significant political and economic reforms that have contributed to sustained economic growth, social development, and political stability gains over the past decade. However, its key development challenges still include poverty, inequality, transparency, and accountability, climate change, continued weak private sector investment, and the vulnerability of the economy to internal and external shocks. Let that just be something to start us off, kick off. And among other, surveys and of course research, corruption has continued to be a very big problem in this country, let alone the drought now due to the Ukraine-Russia war. We're looking at food insecurity and even the banditry attacks in different parts of this country, even as we're gearing towards the election, being a problem. Security. Now, let me hear from our panelists this morning. Be part of the conversation. Let us know your thoughts. Engage with us using the hashtag #TheMorningDrift live on Facebook. Sadam, it's good to have you on set.
Thank you, Ankey.
How are you?
I'm well. I hope you're well too. It's a pleasure being here where we can deliberate on matters national, and especially in the forthcoming general election. I'm looking forward maybe to engaging Kenyans and to give more information why this is a very critical moment in our country, where we are going to have managers and people who will manage this country for the next not only 5 years, but our economic and social economic development.
All right, I like when you say managers, and now you have shifted our focus from the politics and leadership. And I'm curious, why did you say we need managers to actually move this country forward rather than politicians?
It's very important because I think our country is in an ICU where we need to make sure we create ventilators and make sure that we resuscitate this country in terms of all spheres, in terms of the social sphere, economic, spiritual, ensure that we have a great country that we can bequeath to our children. We ensure that we bring in great minds so that we can have a very solid country. We know Nairobi is a special hub in terms of economic activities. And my clarion call is coming election. It's a very critical one where majority of us are young people.
Yes.
We are unemployed. We are having so many misgivings about this country. Let's ensure that we give and get the best leaders for the next 5 years.
Well, somebody we hosted once said, you are the change, and the reason why you're the change and when you become the change is only when you vote.
Sure.
And that power lies in the vote.
Sure.
However, let's come back to reality, Sadam. We are celebrating about, 59 years of independence.
Sure.
Jamhuri Day, Madaraka Day, Mashujaa Day, we're always celebrating that. Now, the past Madaraka Day, a lot of Kenyans who we spoke to literally came out and said, I don't see the reason why we're celebrating. They say, not yet Uhuru, not yet Madaraka. And other, situations that they brought forth were, we are hungry, we don't have enough food, economic harsh times, among other things. And I really want to hear from you before we even get into the manifestos, which seem to, want to actually solve these problems. Do you agree with most Kenyans that this could be some of the problems you're facing today?
I surely agree and concur that Kenya is not where it ought to be. You see, we can compare this country to some other countries like Singapore, like the Asian Tigers economy, where we almost got independence almost at the same time. But along the way, we were left behind, and those other countries really moved forward. So it's a sad affair that 59 years after independence, we still have almost half of this country, people living below poverty line. Majority of them are scared that they'll sink into the poverty line. We still have, I think, close to 5 million Kenyans facing starvation. We still have the rate of unemployment being so high. So I really concur and feel the pinch and urge my fellow Kenyans, all is not lost.
All right.
We have an opportunity to tilt and upset the political landscape. Since we are the majority, when you talk about unemployment, when you talk about poor health services, when you talk about poor administrative services, it is we, the young people, especially the youth of this country. We are educated, we are well informed, we are equipped with the skills. First and foremost, let us exercise our numbers, our strength on the ballot. Elect people who will bear us and at least include us in the decision-making table.
Sadam, I'm sorry to interject. You mentioned, I agree with you, that the youth are the majority, no problem. And of course, IEBC came out, showed us, the voter registration turnout. You do agree with me, the majority that we saw there are not the youth. So even as we're coming into that, I'm not going to probably, dwell on that. But let's talk about the electioneering period and campaigns. It's like the norm, the manifesto. Yes, and so far we're seeing 4 presidential candidates. You're with me.
Yeah.
And each of them did unveil their manifestos, looking at, Raila Odinga and Ruto, then saying what they can do in 100 days.
Sure.
Let's have a quick check, probably a quick review, and hear your opinion on each of these 4 in your own way of summary. How practical you think they are before we delve deeper into the details of each?
You see, these manifestos, they are more or less the same, because each one of them, each manifesto talks about economic resuscitation, the rate of unemployment, how we are going to reduce the tax rate of this country. We are talking about how we are going to empower the middle and small business traders. But now it boils down to each candidate's track record, because candidates have a tendency of using nice words to lure you, to get into your brain. Then all of a sudden, after the 9th, they are nowhere to be found. So, and this cuts across all the 6 elective positions. We have a tendency of leaders or politicians using the young people as pawns so that they achieve their political objectives. It is very sad that we, over the years, we have talked about these manifestos, nice manifestos, but there is little to show in terms of the delivery of those manifestos.
So I will challenge you, sir. You are always very vocal about Kenya Kwanza.
Sure.
All right. Now, Deputy President William Ruto is now the presidential candidate for UDA, of course, within Kenya Kwanza. And when the Jubilee government took, took government, they did have the manifestos as well. Most of which Kenyans say, fine, we are able to see some bit of infrastructural development, among others. However, majority say we have not seen all these manifestos come in as reality. Now, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga has also been part of the handshake as well. Promises and promises. Now, before we go into their now new manifestos, do you think that they are part of the so-called we say a lot and do very little, yet they're still going to be on the ballot on the 9th?
It's a very tricky situation, because you see the manifesto of 2013-2017, my presidential candidate, the deputy president, he is and was the deputy president. And you see your ability and your capacity to initiate some of these policies and some of these projects are really curtailed because you are at the discretion of the senior, okay? You are both the president. Now, I think now we are at a different juncture altogether, because if we go back further, we had a coalition government between the late President Kibaki and Raila Amolo Odinga, the former premier. And you can see everybody now speaks good of the late President Kibaki. Why? Because there was high level of infrastructural development, and this goes directly, and it is accredited directly to the president. Now, in 2013-2017, we have a different ball game altogether, because we have the first term, 2013-2017, where a majority of the Jubilee administration accomplishes were done.
All right.
In 2013-2017, there were tarmacs built equivalent to the first 3 administrations of this country. We have TVETs. We have built all 3 TVETs in every county of this country. That
is under the Jubilee government?
Under the Jubilee government in the first administration. We tried so hard because we inherited an administration that had a lot to do with the old regime. We wanted to bring it, to digitalize it, and make sure that we bring fresh ideas and fresh opinions. But along the way, immediately after the first term, the government's objective and trajectory changed. And this is attributed majorly due to the handshake. Because immediately after the first term, we had the handshake in 2018. And this was occasioned due to the heated and nullification of the elections. So from where I sit, I strongly believe that Jubilee's administration and scorecard really can be measured during the first term.
During the first term, the first 5 years?
The first 5 years.
Allow me to keep it on that, and I want to hear from the viewer if they're following closely on social media. Your opinion also counts. Remember, it's just 6 days to the August polls. Do you agree with the conversation we're having? Are there insights you'd love to share? Talk to me on @LookUpTV. We're live on Facebook. The comment section is fully yours. And now let's go. That was just, laying foundation to where we have come from. And now into the manifestos today. People calling that quote-unquote promises. All right.
Sure.
Different presidential candidates have come out with their running mates as well and their manifestos. What we say will then build your confidence to say, this is my preferred candidate, this is my next president. Let's start with, of course, most of them did not turn out for the presidential debate.
Sure.
But let's just go, and look at each of those. I don't know what your thoughts are of Mwaure. He's a presidential candidate as well, and you followed closely. He was there for the presidential, candidate. He spoke his part. He also has a manifesto. Among them, talking about, increasing revenue allocation to counties to 40%, designate 10% of the 40% to go directly to the village councils. And also he's talked about he's intending to convene a task force to study the possibilities of dissolving Nairobi County after this election, so that post-2027, therefore, Nairobi governor be appointee of the president after elections and an automatic member of the cabinet, among other things. What did you pick from his manifesto? How practical?
He's a great man, very experienced. He's also an advocate of the High Court. I really cherish his way of thinking. He's a practical-oriented individual. The only disconnect he has is these kind of characters don't have any sort of mileage or capital in the political landscape. You see, you must have come from somewhere. You see, the presidential candidate Mwaure, he has not ever vied even from for an MCA seat, member of parliament. You see, so he has a disconnect. You see, he's more of a corporate guy, I think, for lack of a better word, maybe I can say he's more of a managerial skilled guy.
But when we started, you said we need more managers for this country.
Sure.
So I don't understand the disconnect. Is it that the manifesto, coming into reality or being implemented does also depend on a few things that the leader needs to have besides being a manager?
As much as you are a good manager, you should have some mobilization skills. You see, you are leading a group or a whole nation. People should feel inclined to your way of thinking, to your way of doing things, as opposed as a corporate guy. So that's the disconnect with Maure. He's a good guy. He's a man of God. So he really has room, especially for us, I think, in Kenya Kwanza. A
few people watching this morning seem to not agree with you, of course citing, but history has it that Maure has, before then, been in politics.
Oh, he vied but never succeeded.
So then he has tasted it. He probably has a glimpse of what he's talking about.
As much as you see, you vie and win. If you vie, you see, compare him with other candidates. Compare him with maybe the deputy president.
Okay.
His political CV speaks volumes. You compare him with the former premier. The former premier CV speaks volumes. I think Maure is. His political muscle is a little bit below par.
All right, let's hold that thought and take a look at, of course, Wahiga Maure speaking for himself right here on The Morning Drift to give you a recap of what exactly does his manifesto look like and what did he have to say on how practical it is and how his promises will then come to pass and be implemented. This is our first person this morning. Take a look.
That we will not do it the style of those who've been there before. They have promised Kenyans what they will do, but they have not told them where they will get the money from. For us, we started by telling you where our money is from, where our money is. And we are saying when you vote us in and vote us into that leadership, we'll get that money. We'll get that money for you. My running mate and I bring goodwill. My running mate and I bring resolve. My running mate and I are also not standing here to tell you we'll throw this money into that project or this. We are telling you that you and ourselves will decide, we'll work together, decide what to do, and start from known to unknown.
All right, they're a very confident presidential candidate. What are your thoughts as well as a Kenyan watching back at home? How practical, okay, are those particular promises? And of course, among other things that we have not really highlighted or he hasn't, touched on, is Maure has also said in his plan for Kenyan workers, he has pledged a general waiver of about 50% payee. And trust me, payee is heavy on Kenyans as we were speaking. I was speaking to Simba yesterday about it, as well as a conducive environment for the private sector individuals and others to set up businesses in a bid to boost entrepreneurship. Besides that, the aspirant plans to move the Asset Recovery Agency to presidency. All right, devolve budgeting to the village councils, like I mentioned, as opposed to the Treasury or the State House Budget Office, okay, and go after the quote-unquote big fish of corruption and ensure they are subjected to the due process of the law. Let's come to the corruption idea. For how long have we been fighting corruption? Year in, year out. Jubilee has been in government for 10 years. Corruption, shot. All right, and Maure is coming up with a new idea here of actually dealing with the quote-unquote big fish in his own way. If you follow that manifesto, how practical is that fight against graft as well?
You see the difference between, for example, Maure and we in Kenya Kwanza. Our fight against corruption is going to be institutionalized, where we are going to empower the EACC, DCI, the judicial system to ensure that we fight corruption through the proper institutions. Now, for example, Maure, presidential candidate Maure, he's talking about ensuring that you make the Asset Recovery Institution part of the presidency. I think that is where he's getting it wrong, because if you make fight against corruption a political endeavor, it can easily be used or misconstrued to mean political witch hunt. Now, we in Kenya Kwanza believe that the fight against corruption should be based and given to institutions, empower these institutions with the legal framework, regulatory framework, give them resources, give them manpower, that if one is found culpable of practicing in any way of public funds embezzlement, he or she will be taken to court, maybe investigated, using the institutions. We need to have and draw a very clear line between institutions, and we need to between a clear differentiation between politics and fight against corruption. Because if you mix the two, chances of you missing the point, or this the fight against corruption being seen as political witch hunt, chances are very high. So we strongly believe that if we empower these institutions, empower the judiciary, let the judiciary have their own finances, let the courts ensure that they are able to hear cases. You know, some of these cases are lengthy cases.
So essentially you're saying all the arms of the government allocated what they ought to have as funds to allow them operate. However, I like that you keep reiterating we as Kenya Kwanza. We're going to be coming in to Kenya Kwanza's manifesto, and I'll put you on the spot for this one. The NCIC is a body you say we ought to respect from Kenya Kwanza, and they, you know, before we started the campaigns officially, listed the words termed as hate speech. Among them, quote unquote, I will not say on air, allow me to say it for the sake of the Mwananchi, Sipangwingwi, which has continued to be used anyway by your presidential candidate. Also, we're looking at, among other things, Deputy President, running mate Gachagua, also being listed out now to also, according to the courts, ensure that the over 200 million shillings is given back. All right. Now, those are matters graphed, and we're looking at corruption not being mixed with politics. We're coming into, of course, the manifesto of Kenya Kwanza, looking at how Reality Check brings in what they're bringing in as their manifesto. And like you have said, the people who ought to actually implement this, are they up to the task? We'll be right back with the promises. How practical.